So now that we've talked about how things go south and what can go wrong, I'm going to give you a few hints, some strategies, and some options for resolving this. So first and foremost, appeal options. If your client does receive that letter 1058, our final notice of intent to levy and notice rights to a hearing, it's a long, lengthy name of the letter, you might want to consider if you can file an appeal. Now that can actually help you set up payment arrangements for your client or hold up collections, just stop collections while they're working this, waiting for it to go to the appeals. You can have your clients go ahead and make some payments and bring that dollar amount down in that process. Sometimes you have to wait for a revenue officer to be assigned. There's a lot of things, but if they have the right for an appeal, you might consider that. The simplest one, compliance. This is an important factor to consider in any employment tax case. So even if they've been terrible in the past, they've not been very good on their compliance with filings for paying, they need to show they're in current compliance and they can maintain it. So have them think of a different way of going about it. File all required returns, provide proof of payment of those current liabilities, even if they can't pay those old ones yet. This is going to be helpful if you're seeking an installment agreement because it's going to show that they can meet their obligation and they're no longer, it's called pyramiding in IRS speak, but they're no longer adding to the liability. If they can show a good track record as you're working a case for them, it's going to go a long way to working out a solution. So you might really help them rethink how to do their payroll properly. Penalty abatements. You might consider if there are circumstances that might have caused the business to be unable to meet their obligations. So, for example, I had one actually very recently where the business owner had a severe illness and he was like the sole owner of this corporation. His son had to take over because I think it was a really sudden illness and he didn't know how to do the payroll taxes, tried to get a company involved to help him, so they fell behind. In that case, that's what we call a reasonable cause. It might actually serve to reduce the amount of liabilities because remember all those penalties we talked about? If there's a way to reduce those penalties, it might suddenly bring our dollar amount under $25,000, for example, and now we have the ability to express in business installment agreement, or just help them to pay it down faster because they won't owe as much. Paying down the balance. We talked about one of the strategies a little bit ago. If they're in current compliance and they're just barely over some of those limits, maybe when they want to pay down those amounts, make sure they're designating to trust fund portion. Paying down the balance certainly can be a strategy, but consider the business viability. So this is where you might have to ask the difficult question if the business is viable. If they're not able to meet their employment tax obligations, it's a valid question because if they can't meet it now and they're just going to keep pyramiding it, then maybe they shouldn't be in business anymore. Sometimes it's in the better interest of the business and the owners to close instead of continuing to accrue employment taxes that it cannot pay. Now, this is not a free pass. It's not telling you to ever advise a client, close down and start up another company, you're going to get out of payroll taxes. That's outright fraud. And of course, none of you guys would ever do that. But that, unfortunately, sometimes is a temptation for some clients. No, this is truly saying, this is not a viable business and this is the best way to move forward. What will happen is more often than not, they're still going to assess the trust fund portion and collect that from the responsible owners. Parties, the responsible person, I should say. But the rest of it may be basically forgiven for the amount of whatever the asset value is. So that can be a technique or a strategy. Offering compromise in some case. Sometimes a business client can be subject to, let's say, a payroll company taking the funds they paid to cover the taxes and they failed to remit that payment. That, and of course the business has to qualify. They have to show that, it's an asset and income and expense calculation. That could be a valid offer in compromise and businesses can file them. Also, if they have paid all the trust fund taxes and all they have left is the employer share and, let's say, penalties and interest, they could also qualify if they qualify for an offer. So that's a couple of considerations. You can't get an offer on trust fund taxes. Just know that's a difficulty if it hasn't been paid in some fashion. Prevention, last of all, that's one of the best ways of assisting a client in getting payroll tax issues cleared up. And in the good graces of the IRS, simply do things in a different way. So maybe teach them techniques to set aside their payroll taxes in a separate account. We actually do this quite often for ours. We tell them, hey, go set up a bank account today. That's going to be your tax account. You're never going to touch those monies in that tax account ever. So it's teaching them a different way of doing things. And we teach them every single time they do payroll, they put all of their payroll taxes in that account. They never touch those, and the rest of their main bank account is still theirs. So maybe pay it more often. Let's say you have a monthly depositor. The IRS never minds if you pay more frequently, guys. You can tell that monthly depositor, hey, you pay payroll weekly. Tell you what, you're going to be paying those taxes in every single week. Let's say 4 or 5 days after you do your payroll. Doing things differently, that can help prevent problems to build up in the future. So if you can show somebody can keep in compliance, even if they're paying more frequently, they're doing things differently, while you're waiting on an appeal, while you're waiting on another action, that can be a great strategy. Get your business client on track immediately. So last of all, we're going to talk about just a couple more things in here. And that is, let me switch to that really fast here. So we talked about all these different options. These are what we use for that employer that got themselves in trouble, and we don't know, what other options we would have for them except for using these strategies. But no, that's not absolutely everything. What we're going to talk about is you have resources out there. You can look to canopytax.com community. We are resources for each other, guys. We are not, adversaries. We're able to help put questions out there and say, hey, this is what I've discovered, or this is my experience, or hey, do you guys know anything about that? So use that resource. I've also put my email out there for you, so that way you can reach out to me. Canopy's emails, they are a wonderful resource of information. There is the IRS transcript tool that they have. Absolutely check that out, guys, because don't even get into an employment tax case with as much risk as there is that case can go criminal for a client. Be aware of what's going on before you really step into those shoes of representing that client. You have, of course, Canopy as the resource for tax resolution and practice management. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do through TaxEdge. And that is for all of our accountants that, years ago when I started out, I wished I had a resource like this actually, because if you haven't done a lot of cases, it can be incredibly intimidating. Or if you have that one really big case and you just don't know what to do or feel maybe you know just enough to be dangerous. Well, we offer consulting, so that is where the accountant just says, hey, here's all the facts in my case and wants just a little bit of some extra ideas or wants a little bit of some extra knowledge. Or we can actually do the work itself, the true casework, so we're the one on the hook. Well, then you get to have a portion of those fees in that case, so we can essentially act as your backroom service. So a couple things for you to consider. Reach out to me if that's something that may assist you. You can email me or call our office anytime. And I hope that throughout the course that you joined us on today, you were able to gain something a little bit more about employment taxes that you didn't know before, and hope you join us in another one. Take care.